Black Gemara. Today begins a new period, the concept of Toder She'enu Toder Toder Kodim, that if something is more common, if something is less common, that which is more common takes precedence. And then we have another principle, which is something which is Kaddish, something which is holier than something else, takes precedence as well. And then the obvious question is, so what happens if you have a Toder versus a Mekudish? Which one takes precedence, the Toder or the Mekudish? But that the Gemara will ask in a few days' time. Okay, so let's begin. Just a little appetizer. We're beginning now, but it all starts with Kabbanis. And in fact, the Gemara basically focuses on Kabbanis, but we use it, it's a rule in everywhere. You know, it comes on Shchedish and Shabbos, which Haftarah do you read? There's so many in Shchedish, Chanukah and Shabbos, which one do you read? Talis and Tefillin, which one do you put on first? You know, you have Todah, you have Mekudish, all these rules. Says the Mishnah, that pay test on Aleph, the new Pedic. Anything which is more common than the next, it always takes precedence. So, for example, we're talking here about Kabbanis. Yeah, let's say it's Shabbos, Shabbos or Chodesh, then obviously the Musaf of Shabbos takes place over the Musaf of Chodesh. Every single day you have a carbon tamid, and on Shabbos you have to bring a carbon Musaf. Which one do you bring first? You bring the carbon tamid first, because Todah, that which is more common always takes precedence. So anything which is more common takes precedence. The carbon tamid takes precedence over the Musaf. Musaf is Shabbos, Musaf is Chodesh. The Musaf of Shabbos takes precedence over the Musaf of Chodesh. It's more common. It's every week. Musafir is Chodesh, Kaibin Musafir is Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah falls down on Rosh Chodesh, always on Rosh Chodesh. Musafir Chodesh comes first. And it says, how do we know all this? Because it says in the pasuk that Milvad Oilas Haboiker, Asher lo Oilas Tamid, in addition to the Oilas Haboiker, in the morning, which is the Oilas Tamid, is Tasus Eila. You also do these other ones. They were talking about the Kabbanas of Sukkot. You do all these other Kabbanas as well. So that's how you learn out. This is Muvad Oilas HaBoiker. First you do the Oilas HaBoiker, because that's Oilas Tamid. That's every single day, the carbon Tamid. And then you do your other carbon Masafim and so on. So you about Menolan, how do you know? For you want Menolan? The Mishnah even gave us a reason. We know the pasuk. What are you asking? How do you know that Todah and Todah Kodim? Muvad Oilas HaBoiker. It says it clearly. So the Gemara, Dilma, no, that makes sense when something can really fall under the umbrella of Todah. Carbon tamid is every single day. Oh, that's a tadir. Musaf is only a Shabbos, a tadir kaidim. But let's say it's one musaf versus another musaf. Let's say musaf of Chodesh versus a musaf of Yom Tov. Musaf of Chodesh is also not tadir. It's only 12 times a year. And another compared to musaf of Yom Tov, it's more tadir. So how do you know that there's a concept called tadir? That's what we're asking. So it was a dilma to median hain, the kodmul musaf, to median takes precedence to didi. There every day. On Haina, one musaf to another musaf, and that's my question. It says in the pasuk. Okay, it says first. It says in the pasuk, "Mavad Eilas Haboiker," right? Except in addition to the Eilas Haboiker, you got to bring a musaf. It says Tasu es Eila, do these, and the next pasuk says Ka'ela. Like every show you go to, everybody sees together. It's a Ka'ela. Yeah, like this. Tasu liyam. You should do the talk about the karmusa this like this. So we say Eila Ka'ela. That which we just the same din that we treated the carbon tamid and the musaf tadir shein tadir is ka'ela. The same thing apply within musafim itself. Is the Amar Abelod Amakros? Suppose ka'ela tasal yom shivas yamim. It says in the pasuk the same thing you should do every day, every for the day within the 7 days, and it says again at the end tamid and so on. Is eila ka'ela. What that whatever we did in the first pasuk, that didn't continue on in the next pasuk as well within musafim itself. So, for example, you have a Shabbos in the middle of Yom Tov. Which carbon takes first? The Shabbos takes first, because it's Eila. When it comes to Musaf, treated the same way as you treated the Musaf compared to the carbon. What do you mean? We need this pasuk to tell you, there are carbon Musafim. There's nothing extra here to tell you that we should equate the two psukim. No, if all the pasuk is coming to tell you bring carbon Musaf, nichtav Eila tasuliyim. Just say Eila. Why the? What do you mean like these? What's a like? By saying like, what you're saying is just like we just read about Musaf and Tom and Carbon Tom, Tadish and Tadi, the same thing applies within Musaf itself. Does anyone know? You had no breda. E kosev eila tasu liyayim shiva seyam. If we would have just said the post like this, eila, this is what you should do liyayim, the day of the 7 days. You know how I say? How I mean eila l'shiva seyamim, that you take the 7 karbonos and they're spread out over 7 days. Eila l'shiva seyamim. By saying eila like these every single day. L'yoyim ksiv. Says, how can you say that? How can you think that the 7 kabbanas are spread over 7 days when it says clearly l'yoyim in 1 day? So he went, okay, but maybe without the ke'ela, I would say like this. I would say, okay, the first day l'yoyim you got to bring all 7, but all the other days you bring whatever you want. Eila is l'yoyim. I would say the first day you bring this amount, the seven lamp. We don't know. Therefore, Moshe says you can't say that. We still don't need a cup for that. Why? Because it says in the pasuk tasu, it says let's say, wouldn't say cup, we'll just say eila. Eila tasu. This is what you should do in plural. And then it says yom shivas yomim. It sounds like in plural every day of the 7 days. Sheyu kol hasiyayu shabbos. All the days should be the same. So my question goes back: how do you know that within musafim, within things which are not so tadir, there's still more tadir versus less? Abai says, Maguf the Kra, you know that from the very pasuk itself. Why? Because Imkain let it say, Kra, Milvad, Oilas HaBoiker. It could have just said, Milvad, Oilas HaBoiker, V'tishtek. The first part said, Milvad, Oilas HaBoiker. Why does it have to say, Ashallah, Oilas Tamid? We know the Oilas HaBoiker is every morning the Oilas HaBoiker is the Karm Tamid. The Tish, Ashallah, Oilas HaTamid Lamali. Why do you have Oilas HaTamid? The Meima to tell you, the Hach, the Tadida Tiktum, that this, I want you to know that, or that this is a rule. These extra words will teach you a rule that whatever is more Tadid always takes precedence.
This is the second answer. Let's give another answer.
Yeah. The first answer was Pasha the Dig of Eila, the Chaf. And Abai, you don't need to come on this whole thing, because then you have this whole Shakavataya. Who said it's extra? Maybe we needed to tell you. So we went every step of the way. And we concluded that it is extra because we could have learned everything from the word Tasu, that you bring 7 animals every single day. Abai said you don't have to come on to all that. Posh the Pshat and the Posse, the Goof the Croy, you can see already that it's extra to tell you the din of Tamid. Okay, that's the din of Tadin. Now goes the next din. Anything which is more special and more sacred. And more sacred doesn't necessarily mean a higher madrega, can mean more of. Even if it's the same madrega, but it's more of it than the other one in Kamus, of more of this Kedusha than the other one, that's also considered Mekudish, Yaisim Echavede. Is Kaidem Echavede. So now we're going to go through all the Kabbanas, and this is what the Gemara is going to go through each carbon to work out why this is more chashuv than this. So the first one, Damachatas, the blood of a carbon chatas, you bring 2 Kabbanas. Which one should be sprayed first, the Damachatas or the Dama Oila? You would think maybe the oil because it gets all burnt on the mizbech, but that's not the dam. The dam part of it, the chatas comes first. Why? Because that's mechaper and aveda. Aveda has karas. Dam chatas dam oilim they should meratze because it forgives avedas. Evore oili, but now let's go to the evorim that go on the mizbeach, the evore of the oil and the evorim of the chatas. Here, which one takes precedence? The oil, because the oil, entire oil gets burnt on the mizbeach. Mashenkin by chatas, only the fats and the limbs. So it's more of kedusha by the oil than chatas. It gets entirely burned on the mizbeach. So we're talking about after you spray the blood, what happens next? Okay, then it says mechatas kodemes la'osham kar mechatas the kar la'osham. They're both coming here to be mechape. Which one comes first? Now we're not sure. And what we're talking about, are we talking about the blood over here, or we're talking about now the emurim? It doesn't spell out exactly what we're talking about here. These the chatas come before us. You know why? By a carbon chatas, you spray it on all by 4 corners. Mashenkin a carbon asham mishtayim shehein arba, only 2. So you spray more on the by the chatas, number 1, and number 2 is ala yisaid. What do you do with the leftover chatas? You pour down the yisaid by that bottom protrusion of the mizbech, by the plate there. Mashain kain by asham doesn't say that you have to pour it down there. Then it says asham, it comes before tater. Why is it before tater? Obviously, ve'el nazir, or the ram of a nazir. Why is that? Because you cut. They're kachim talim. You can eat it entire. Yisrael can eat it entire shleim, and this is kachim. Okay, toida ve'el nazir. What about a carbon toida nazir compared to l'shlamim? They take precedence over shlamim. Why? First of all, interesting, the fact that they're limited in scope in how long you can eat means we're more machmer with it. Means it has maybe a higher level of kedusha. We can't just let it go on. Zweitens, utu uni lechem. You also have an asilri with a carbon tamid and the el nazir. By a tamid you have 4 different kinds of breads, and by el nazir you have 2, but they both come with something else. Mashenkin shlamim. Hashlamim kaimil b'chayr. The shlamim come before b'chayr. Bipnei shehein tu'unin matan dalad. A b'chayr only needs to spray once, one corner. Mashenkin shlamim you have to spray on 4 corners. And up there, one. Number 2 is you have all this extra din in my shlamim. Smicha, you have to lean on it. Number 3, nusachim, it comes with these libations. And number 4, utunufas chazei b'sheik. You have to weigh the chazei b'sheik. So therefore, carbon tamid, carbon taida, shlamim takes precedence over a b'chayr. A b'chayr takes precedence over ma'isa behema. Ma'isa behema, every 10th you bring it. Why does a b'chayr take precedence? Because it's more kedusha. How do you know that? Because who can eat a b'chayr and who can eat ma'isa behema? It's not up to me to make it kaddish. It's born this way. Erstens. And zweitens, only koinim are able to eat it. And anyone can eat it. Number 3. And next one. The ma'aser behema koidim lo'efes. Take precedence over birds. I don't care what madrega of bird it is. Why? It is a behema. And a behema uses normal shchita, a bird is malika. And since every single carbon requires shchita, so that activity is a more chashuv activity. So therefore, a mice is more chashuv than a bird, even though the bird might be an oilachat, whatever it is. The yesh boy kodesh kedoshim. And Nachmer, mice behema has in it also a part of it goes to kedoshim. What is that? The blood, the emurav, and the fats. The blood of a mice behema goes on the mizbeach. Birds also, the blood goes in mizbeach. Remember, we'll ask why you mentioned it. And then, but the fats, there is no fats by a bird. It all gets eaten by a kohen. Chatas oil gets all eaten by a kohen. Oil so we go with bird in mizbeach. Mashenkin by behema, you have part of it. Every behema has in it, even kosher cow has in it a little bit of kodesh kedoshim. That is what goes on the mizbeach. A bird comes before a mincha. Why? It has, if there's blood by a bird at least, you whatever you spray or you do mitzvah, so therefore there's more of a kapara than a carbon mincha. Minchas chayte, in minchas there are all kinds of minchas, and minchas of dava, but you also have a minchas of a sinner. And a minchas chayte takes precedence over a minchas nadava. Like a minchas chayte of a saita and so on, takes precedence over a minchas of, or somebody who sinned in a carbon oil of a yel, you can't afford a behemoth, you can't afford a bird, you bring a mincha. So it's a minchas chayte. They take precedence over the dava. Why? They should bala chayte, because it has to do with the sin. And the Gemara will talk about whether it includes also a saita as well. The chatas of a bird takes precedence over an oilas oif. How do we know that? We know by behemoth. We said we mentioned before by the bird as well. We'll see from psukim. When you set it aside and you're going to call, you bring 2 birds. Always call the chatas bird before you call the oila bird. Now the Gemara will go through each case to explain how do you know that this is more holy than that. Says the Gemara. How do you know? Let's say the blood of a chatas come before the blood of an oila. How do you know that? And how do you know the next part? And the limbs of an oila takes precedence over the limbs of chatas. We gave us a svara. How do you know? Says the Gemara. The Tanna we learned. The second part, if it comes to tell you shehein shnayim that two hadikvanem, it already says it says you should make. It says in the pasuk like this: to tell you that you have 2 kabbanas. It already says in the pasuk you should make one a chatas and you should make one an oila. It says so matam. It says in the pasuk here you should take a par ben boker and mechasa. It talks about in the scene. The scene will bring the finger. So it says that you should bring a par ben boker and so you take a par ben boker. So the par sheni ben boker tilachab. So we're talking about it here when you're anointing your mechanech the levim. When you're mechanech the levim. So it says over here you should take a par ben boker. Par sheni should be a chatas. The second par should be a chatas, and then it says in the pasuk later on. So it says the second part is a chatas, right? Which means the first part is going to be an oila. But a few psukim later, it says the levim should lean the hands on it, and then it says you should make one a chatas and one an oila. This is chatas first and oil second. What's going on here? So which is first, which is second? First is parasheni, and then later on it says you should start making your hands. It says you should make one a chatas, one an oil. Sounds like the chatas comes first. So what's going on here? You have two psukim that seem to contradict each other. So the Gemara goes on. Parasheni b'bakar tilachatas. Now, why is the pasuk telling you? Im bala lamed yishnaim says b'chalda tu harikvar nemer. It says you should make one a chatas and one an oil. So we know that two kabbanas. What to spell out? What do you mean? Tell me the second one should be chatas? I would have thought the chatas should be first. The Torah said no. Parsheni the chatas. Okay, chatas is number two. Tamalei parsheni ben baked the chatas. No, so how come parsheni? So if the parsheni yochel like them the chatas, that means which is the first? The oila, the chol maseh, and all activities. Tamalei two psukim later says, but also zeh chatas zeh oila. The chatas comes first. Okay, it said. So now I'll tell you. When it comes to dam, which is the kapara part of it, it's chatas kedemis, the dam eila, mipnei shemaratza. And when it comes to the other part, the evarim, the oila comes first. As we'll see, evari oila. When it comes to the evarim, the limbs that go on his beach, there the oila comes first. B'mai. Someone asked an interesting question. Okay, so that's how we know the evarim. But that's an interesting question. Remember, you have to do 4 sprinkles by a chatas, but we learned b'di'ev you did only 1. You're ready a kapara. The rest is only a mitzvah. All you need is 1. So the chayra, let's say like this. Why is the chatas coming for an oila? Because kapara. So let's do the first sprinkle. The first sprinkle should be a chatas. Then do the rest oila, because oila is more chashuv. And then go back to do the 3 sprinkles of the chatas. If the only reason why the chatas is sorry? Yeah, why? What makes the chatas more kudish? Because it's meratza on the sin. But that's only the first matana. The other 3 matanas is the same mitzvah. Yeah, exactly. So then go back to the oil, which is more chashav. Haraya, the emur, and the fats go on those be'er first for the mother. My matana kamais in the mechapra taking me first. The rest shouldn't. What are you talking about? Over here in this pasuk, we're talking about there's no kapara. There's no kapara here because remember this is a chinuch of levim. You're in indoctrination. Or induction. You're inducting all the Levim into their role, and so there's no kapara, and yet chatas comes first. So therefore, matanas makes no difference. First, second, third, fourth. In this case, the chatas is no different than the oila. It's only for chinuch. And yet the Torah says that the chatas comes first. So we know it goes that way all places. No, it's not because it's mechaper. It's because the Torah there's a cause of chatas comes first. Marov answers no. Because of mechaper, no vos. It doesn't make sense to stop, and go to oila and then resume. Once you started already for good reason, continue. Now I ask interesting question. So what you tell me when it comes to dam, chatas takes precedence. When it comes to emurim, oil takes precedence. What happens? You're in 2 different stages of the kabbanis. You're now ready to either sprinkle the dam of the chatas, or you're ready to put the emurim on the mizbech of the oil. Now which one takes precedence? Which activity should you do first? The dam of the chatas or the emurim of the oil? Dam chatas, but oil, which one first? Do the dam chatas because it forgives? Or do because that goes on the fire? Which one? Toshma, we're going to make a dik, and then you'll see the dik doesn't mean anything. Touch my dam chatas in the Mishnah. The dam chatas is teilum dam oila. The blood of the chatas takes place only over the blood of the oila. So we're going to be dashing the dam oila the kadim. Only for the blood. If you have the blood of a chatas versus the fats of an oila, then the oila comes first. Like kadim, the blood of a chatas does not take precedence. Says the Gemara, that's your dik. Let's go on. And then it says later on, but the limbs of the oila take precedence over the fats of a chatas. So it sounds like only the limbs of an oila take precedence. To the limbs of a chatas, but not to the blood of a chatas. You can't bring any item from Mishnah. The next question is the other way around. You have the blood of an oila, which is inferior, and you have the chatas, which is inferior. The fats and the limbs of a chatas. So which one takes precedence? Do we say dam oil kodim the kosher color? Do we say that blood of an oil, even though it itself is not going on his beach, it doesn't get burnt, but it comes from a carbon which is so chashuv, gets burnt? Or you do a mudichatos kodim, the fats of a chatas takes precedence because we it comes from a carbon that's going to chaper. Toshma coming here. Dam chatas kodim dam oil, the blood of a chatas comes before the blood of an oil. Dam chatas with the kodim dam oil, only the blood of a chatas comes before an oil. Let's make a dik. Only the blood of a chatas comes before the blood of an oil. Aval a mudichatas, but the fats of a chatas does not take precedence over the blood of an oila. Loy, telling what if that's going to be a dik, I can make the same dik. Fakert adraba meseifa. It says in the seifa, Evari oila kaidmi le'mori chatas. The Evarim of the oila take precedence over the fats of a chatas. Evari oila de kaidmi le'mori chatas. Only the limbs of an oila take precedence over the fats of a chatas. Avadam oila, but not the blood of an oila. El maholek l'machem mishno. You can't bring any raya one way or another. Ibailu. Next question. Dam oila v'dam oshim. You have the blood of an oila versus the blood of an oshim. The Mishnah goes, oila chatas oila, and then the chatas oshim. What about oila and oshim? Compare the two. Which is more kaddish? Eidem and which take precedence? Do we say dam oila kodim, the oshim kodim, even though the blood comes from a choshev, a behemoth, because it gets all burnt? Or dam oshim kodim? Why? The mechaper oshim at the end of the days also forgives for avedis. Sham gzelis or sham milas, so many avedis. Pashma coming here, it says that the dam of a chatas takes precedence over the dam of a oila. Sounds like only the dam of a chatas takes precedence. Avol dam oshim loy, but not the blood of an oshim. That's what it sounds like. So let's make that diak. Says the Gemara Nodaya. You want to know why it only talks about the chatas and oila, doesn't talk about the oshim? Because bedinu di boile misad dam oshim. It could have said also that the blood of a chatas takes a precedence over the blood of an oshim, and therefore you would have no diak. In other words, we want to get there that only the blood of a chatas takes precedence over the blood of an oila, but not the blood of an oshim takes precedence over the blood of an oila. Because it doesn't mention it. Well, no, really could have mentioned oshim as well. So why is it only mention the blood of a chatas? She should always say blood of an oshim. In fact, we would then say kavachayver a chatas. The chatas is more chashiv than oshim. It takes away karas. Really could have said oshim as well. But I did the Bail Mishnah Sefer. We want to compare the Sefer about the next part, the contrast between a chatas and an oila. A vore oila koibin le'muri chatas. That the vore oila comes before the fats of a chatas. Now, why couldn't it just say oshim there as well? Because the itone le'muri oshim, if you would have told me that the vorim of an oila takes precedence over the fats of an oshim, I would say, okay, oshim is an inferior carbon to a chatas, but a chatas, which is a kapara, maybe the fats of a chatas takes precedence over the oila. Therefore, we needed to talk about the contrast between the oila and chatas. And we didn't bring oshim, but not to make any diukim. But it shouldn't take precedence over chatas. Chatas, so we're trying to resolve it. An oila and a chatas, an oila and an oshim, which takes precedence over which? Chatas, koidem la-oshim, a chatas takes precedence over an oshim. It says in our Mishnah, right? A chatas takes precedence over an oshim. Sounds like a chatas who did kodme, only a chatas takes precedence over an oshim. But an oila, an oshim does not. Does not take precedence of a chad. No, but our Mishnah says that a chatas takes precedence of an oshim, but doesn't tell us if we're talking about blood or we're talking about the fats. So l'chayda, it says a chatas takes precedence of an oshim. L'chayda, we're talking about the blood. Sounds like only a chatas takes precedence over an oshim, but an oila wouldn't. My love dam. Say, well, no, we're not talking about the blood. We're talking about the fats. We're talking about the fats. We don't know what the din would be. The Mishnah doesn't mention the blood, even though chatas may take precedence of the blood. The Mishnah doesn't mention it, so you can't make a diak. How do I know it's talking about the fats? They can now prove it to you. The tummy it says, you know why the chata takes place before the asham? They should dumb manitim because the blood is in all four corners. That means we're not talking about the blood. If we're talking about the blood, you would just say mipnei shenitim. By throwing in mipnei shedam manitim, it's blood. That means you weren't talking about the blood till now. What were you talking about? The fats. The fats of a chata take precedence over the fats of an asham because the blood of a chata goes in all four corners. So the Mishnah is not talking about the blood. So you can't make a dig regarding oil. Why is the chatas first? L'chayda and oshim should be first. You know why? You pay. There's a limit. Remember, we learned you had to be two. You had to it has to be a certain value. Chatas can be a danka, can be anything, no value. So doesn't that make oshim more chashiv? I feel hachi. I'm going to say this a number of times. Even though this has a mila, this mila is more chashiv than that. The ribui the mizbeach, or the fact there's more blood going on the mizbeach, that's more chashiv. That's the kapara. That's the main part of the korban. Osham kaidim l'toida. Adrab, you told me an osham takes precedence over a toida because it's a kachim. That's kachim kalim. Adrab, a toida vel nozik kam. They should be more chashuv. She came to uni and lechem. You have to all these lechem. I feel a hockey kachim adifri. Yeah, you're right. It has that mila, but this mila that an osham is kachim. You can only eat it in the azara. Only kainim takes precedence over that. Toida vel nozik. It takes precedence over a shlamim. It says shlamim l'chayda adrab shlamim kadmi shlamim refers. You can yeshna b'tzibur. You have a carbon shlamim on a shvuas. You bring the kvosim of atzeres. That's a shlamim. So it has a mila, a very chashuv mila. The fact that it's limited to one day means that it's more chashuv somehow because we want you to finish it sooner, and therefore that mila overrides this one.
Have we spoken about the difference between a patos of an individual or a patos
No.
of a God?
No, no, not here. You have now these two. Break it down further. The Mishnah puts them together. You break down Toida and Nazir. Which one comes first? Toida, do say Toida Makadma came to Una Dalad Min Lechem. You have 4 different kinds of bread. Masheng and Nazir is only 2 different kinds. Oidilma El Nazir Koiding Ash Imai Dami Machedim. Remember, together with the Nazir, you have 3 kabbanas. You bring a whole train of kabbanas with them. Maybe that makes them more chashiv. Hashma coming here, it says in the Bryce Zu Zu. This one precedes the other one. Shazu tuna dal min lechem, doing tuna elish name min lechem. So it says clearly that the Taida takes more chshivas than because there's 4 kinds of bread. Hashlamim kaid min lebchayr, because you have all these activity, you have to smicha truf and all these things. Adrab bechayr kaidim shekidish lechem was born that way. Avanechel lekayim on the kainim. Nevertheless, with mitzvahs, you said even so many mitzvahs, smicha, tenufa, and so many mitzvahs by shlamim more. As Zevachim, therefore, it takes precedence. Abchoy koydem lemaisa behema. Adrab maisa is more powerful. So can make kaddish lefanav alacharav. Remember, by mistake, the 9th animal you called number 10, or the 11th animal you called number 10, they become kodesh. What a power! Yeah, born kodesh is maisa behema. You the one who nominate that this should become kodesh. Maisa kaidem life is Maisa behema is more chashav than a bird, even though the bird might be kadosh and all that. And the birds are kadosh kadoshim. Goes on the mizbeach. What do you mean? And this is Maisa behema. Kachim kalam. Afil hachi mean zevach adi because it's a behema, and you do shchita. That makes him a chashiv because all the kabbanas are that way. David said, "A mude kachim kalim." Remember, we learned by kachim kalim, it does not become the property of the mizbeach until you actually sprinkle the blood. So there's no meila if you use the kachim kalim or shlamim you set aside for yourself. There's no meila. When is the meila? When is it stealing from the hegdish? Once you spray the blood, the parts of the animal, the emurim and the chalam that go on the mizbeach, then you just stole from the Beis Hamikdash. So there's no meila before the zrika. The question is, but you made it holy. Is that holy sufficient that if you took it out of the Beis Hamikdash, it becomes possible because it's yaitse? Or do we say, since there's no stealing, which means the mamish does not belong yet to the Beis Hamikdash, so it's not really kodesh, taking it out, there's no psul of yaitse, and the zrika therefore would be effective. Says the Gemara, you took it before you sprinkle the blood. Psulim it is possible. Is enough kodesh to say that there's a problem. You took it out. But we learned in the Braisim it says because it is I support it. It says in our mission. It says why is let's say Maisa Behema, because this is a korban that's more chashuv than birds. The yeshna koche kochim, and it has in it koche kochim because the pata goes beich. Dumb of what does it have? The blood, the emurin, and the fat. So we see over here that what? Let's understand the blood and the fat. Okay, I understand why the Mishnah mentioned the mila that the kochim columns have fats. Birds don't have it, so the less of the boifers. What do you tell mentioning that the blood of an asham goes in the mizbech? So the blood of a bird also. So what's the mila of a behema asham over a bird? Elalav Kamash, I want to tell you that the blood of a behemoth has the same din. He wants to say that the blood of a behemoth has the same din like the fats, and the fats are the same din like the blood. What do you mean the fats are the same like the blood? If there's a problem with the blood, it had to be before you sprinkle it. Once you sprinkle it, what does it matter? So it had to be before. The same thing with fats. If there's a problem with the fats, what? You took it out of the Beis Hamikdash before you sprinkle the blood, it's possible. To me. Otherwise, that's why the Mishnah mentions dam to tell you that a murim has the same thing like dam, that even before you sprinkle the blood. And we could kachim. And it's called kachim. I tell you, just like blood, if you took it out, let's say before you sprayed it. Obviously, after you sprayed it, you sprayed. But before you sprayed it, it ruins the carbon. Is af a murim mifsal b'yaitza. Saying the murim, you took it out before you sprayed the blood. Even though it's not, there's no mila, there's still a certain level of kedusha. So Gemara name and say, let's bring it out to him. An interesting machlek Rabbi Yechon and Shlakish. Not about the blood, but about the meat. The meat of kachim kalim, sheyotzer lifnei zrikas damin. The meat of kachim kalim, which eventually ends up with the Yisrael anywhere in Yerushalayim, and you took it out before you sprayed the blood. Rabbi Yechon says kosher. The Shlakish says possible. Rabbi Yechon says kosher, and the Gemara right now adds. We thought Rabbi Yechon is saying this. Hoyil v'seifa latzis. What's the difference? After you spray the blood, what do you do with the meat? You can take it outside Yerushalayim, outside the Beis Hamikdash. So you took it out before you sprayed the blood. No big deal. And the Shloki says, no, it is a big deal because it's not the time yet. You only have a right to take it out of the base of Mikdash once you spray the blood. That's the Dover Hamatir that enables it. Adain legizman lotzes. So ad kan le pligi when there's no argument el b'basa arguing by meat. Aval be'emudin, the part that there's not safer lotzes. No, the whole part is because anyway later on you'll take it out to your shleim, so you took it early. But the fats of the carbon you'll never take out of the base. It has to be on the mizbeach. So everyone agrees if you took it out before you spray the blood, it's no good. I will be moving loy. A raya to the Rav Shela. Says the Gemara, no raya at all. Why? Who hadin? The same thing would apply. The Beimuri Nami Pligi, they're arguing both. I've heard me why they're arguing about Basar. Not because Hoyles was safer lots. That the Gemara added. The Gemara made a mistake. They misunderstood the argument. Because Rabbi Yechon holds Haydam Hazrika, there's no problem whatsoever, there's no Kedusha. So if you took it out, I don't care the blood, the meat, all the same. The Shlokish says, no, the Zrika is matir, and you cannot take it out before. And so why we mention Agi Babasa to show you how far the Shlokish is machman, even the Basa, which eventually you'll eat in the Tayir Shalayim. If you took it out before the Zrika, it's possible. Like the Achakay Shlokish, I feel the Basa, the Sefer Lotzes, Amra Dayin Leigi Man Lotzes, you're not no right. And even though and why are we dafka stressing the chum of the shlokish? Sometimes we say koich the teirod if we like to because the chiddush of shlokish is so great. It's in logic. It's hard. It defies logic. So you can take it out later anyway. What's a big deal if you took it out before? And nevertheless, he asks us. So you want to lame it tonight. In fact, the machlek tonight. Just finish the sugya. And what do kachik kalmi? It says the fats of kachik kalmi you took out before you sprayed the blood. The blood says ein my you took out the fats of kachik kalim before you sprayed the blood. Now we're focusing on the mila. Rabbi Lezer says there's no mila even after you sprayed the blood. We said before that once you sprayed the blood, the fats of a carbon now belong to the mizbeach. That's only if it was inside the base of Mikdash. But if you took it out, the zrika had no effect on the meat. In other words, became puzzle. Whatever you took out before the zrika became puzzle. The fats became puzzle. Like the guy, like we said before, and then in the first person who had the boy. There's no chiyuv pigul because it's not part of the carbon. Because it was not inside the base of Mikdash when you did the zrika. There's no noiser, there's no din of tamei, and all that. Rabbi Kiva says, moilim beher. Even though it's not in the base of Mikdash, the zrika affected it. You're stealing, boy. Exactly, property of a hegdish, because there's a certain condition property of hegdish. If the animal, you had the wrong thought in mind, but you did zrika, you did a shchita, and this was outside, and they took it outside, nevertheless, and you eat it, it's pigul. No, you said all the rules apply. My love, now the Gemara says, we're talking about, but the harder ailinu pligi, you brought it back inside. Because you've left it outside, it doesn't make. You brought it back inside, and the question is, you took it out before the zrika, even though you brought it back inside, did it become pasul or not? So therefore, the first opinion says that it became. Belezer says it became pasul when you took it out. When you took it out, and therefore the zrika has no bearing at all on the emurim. There's nothing, and there's no pigul, and there's nothing. And the masava, no problem. You brought it back in, no problem. And that therefore your question is actually a machleki Rabbi Kiva Rabbi Lezer. Says the Gemara. No. Who said? Maybe, but the harder Eileen, if you brought it back inside the base, everyone says that the zrika poil that did not become puzzle. You want to say that it's puzzle. Has a certain kedusha. No, there's no kedusha. Cold mind and spray no kedusha. You brought it back, it's back to normal. And you know what the machlekes here is? You're arguing you left it outside. We want to know now the zika has any effect on it outside. If it's out, not inside the base of Mikdash, the zika did nothing. Therefore, there's no pickle noise of that. Zika does help. But it doesn't make sense. Papa himself explained another machlek. There's another machlek exactly the same regarding you took out the 2 loaves of bread when you're about 2 loaves of bread become mutter on Shavuos after you shecht the 2 kvasim. But what happens if the loaves of bread were taken out before you shechted the 2 kvasim? Can you eat it or not? What happens there? No, you shechted the thing, you took out the 2 loaves of bread, and then you did zrika. So you took it out after the shchita, obviously, because the shchita makes it holy, and then you need the zrika to be matrit. But you took it out. Does the zrika help for the 2 loaves of bread outside the base of English? And there, there you said, the same whether it had any effect or not. And there he said, there's no argument when it's outside that it doesn't have no effect. And you brought it back inside. He said over here. So the Gemara quickly concludes, no. We're talking about 2 loaves of bread, the lav, gufe, the zivcha. We're talking about the 2 loaves of bread that are not part of the animal. So therefore, they're outside. What's the link to the shnei kvasim? Nothing. That's why everyone agrees outside it doesn't affect. It has to be inside. But you took it out and you brought it back in. Abel emurin, the goof of the zivcha, the fats are, you take it from the animal itself. The east nevraypli, arguing outside, does the zika have any appeal or not? I'll go stop over here. Tomorrow night, the Mishnah will learn.